I am so thrilled right now to transition to really a groundbreaking leader in the spirit of engaged athletes, who is not just an athlete herself, but is really part of a whole new business model, a whole new way of thinking about how athletics can change societies. So in a moment, I'm going to invite my friend and inspiration, Cassidy Lichtman, who is a USA volleyball player who now plays for an incredible professional organization called Athletes Unlimited. But probably best for you to hear first what Cassidy has to say about what they are doing.
The thought that keeps running through my head is, look at this thing we built.
Last summer, we were sitting on our couches watching the men play.
At the beginning of this, I asked you, why do you play?
And it makes me think about the women who came before us, who never had this.
And thank you all for buying in. Just really humbled and honored to be amongst all of you.
Such a strong group of women who are role models who have taken this sport to the next level.
If you had asked me to imagine what professional volleyball could look like in the United States, in my wildest dreams, I could not have described this.
Space to be free, to be supported, to be heard and valued. And with that said, representation is extremely important. Being a Black and Puerto Rican woman who is also part of the LGBTQ plus community, it is extremely important to be up here and be a role model for a younger generation. So
continue to play so that people below you have the opportunity to do this and have their life change the way we all did.
Because the question has never been, are we good enough? Are we interesting enough? Are we valuable enough? The question has always been, will you invest in us? Will you make space for us? Will you allow us the opportunities to be the heroes of our own stories? To be the heroes in the eyes of the next generation coming up? Because we're ready. We have been ready. I hope that there comes a time that none of us are playing here. I hope there's a future version of this league that is filled with women who are living out the dream that we planted this last 5 weeks. And that we can come back and look in that book and see our names and see all of the names that came after us and say, look at this thing we built.
Oh my gosh, I get chills every time I see it. Every time I see it, Cassie, I've probably seen it a dozen times and I get chills. Please join me as we get to talk a little bit, Cassidy, about you and the work you're doing at Athletes Unlimited. And I just want to share a bit of a picture so people can have it in their mind as we talk about what this last season was like for you. But first, can you just describe Athletes Unlimited? I mean, it's really unlike anything I have ever heard before. And again, it just gives me so much hope for the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different aspects of Athletes Unlimited that are interesting. So we're a network of women's professional leagues. There are 4 leagues right now in volleyball, basketball, softball, and lacrosse. We play 5-week seasons. We have no set teams, no owners, no general managers. Our players are captains and they redraft their teams each week. And there's sort of an individual leaderboard and a really innovative kind of scoring system. But on the kind of back side of the league, the players are given this kind of unprecedented amount of power in the decision-making processes around all of the things that affect us and our athletes in our league. And so each of our sports has a player executive committee made up of 5 athletes from their league who are working kind of with staff collaboratively, not negotiating, but really on the same side of the table to kind of weigh in on all aspects of the league. Which kind of has redefined for me what it means to have kind of a voice and power as an athlete. And there's an entire kind of focus also around civic leadership, which, you saw the picture just then. We have a campaign called Power My Voice, which I think we'll get into. But it's really kind of core to the values of the league to empower athletes in their voices in whatever ways they want to use them.
When I first learned about it, I actually wrote a book about designing business models and my head exploded because the way that it's thought really disrupts every notion we had about how professional sports athletes work. And first of all, and I really hope that some of the student athletes have just like rocked, you were very casual about the fact that there is a professional softball league, there is a professional lacrosse league, there is a professional volleyball league. Those 3 did not exist in the US before Athletes Unlimited. and basketball, which does exist with the WNBA, but the way it's played. And that alone should just perk these student athletes' ears up. Like, wait a minute, I can get paid to play beyond my sport. There's a league for me. So that is so exciting. And I know, just picking up on what you said about the organization structure, from the beginning, you have this commitment to civic leadership. I know there's actually a leadership role on civic leadership. Can you talk a little bit about the cause campaign that is built into the model and the big milestone that you just hit this summer?
Yeah, so totally agree on everything you said. So all of our athletes are paid, which is amazing. And unfortunately for our sports, revolutionary. In the US, at least. We haven't had opportunities on American soil, at least in my lifetime, which is crazy. But we're all paid a base salary, and then we also get a bonus based on how we finish in the league. And then the league matches on top of that half of our bonus, and they'll give it to the cause of our choice. So every athlete in every one of our leagues picks a cause that they care about, that they want to contribute to at the end of the season. And so this past summer, during our lacrosse and softball leagues, we passed $1 million over essentially 2 years. And I think that's amazing, just for the sum of money and the fact that it's going to great causes, but also that it's going to causes that these athletes have chosen, that they've used their voice to say, this is what we care about. And one of the reasons that they started this program from the very beginning was that as female athletes, we rarely have the kind of money necessary to contribute large sums to charities. So many of the male athletes, like, Steph Curry talked about his foundation, which is fantastic. There are very few female athletes who reach a point where they can contribute those kinds of sums of money. And so, for us to have, it's the largest amount that most of our athletes have ever been able to give to something they care about.
It's incredible. I mean, $1 million in just 2 years distributed among all these athletes as part of how they are doing their sport. I mean, that's going to change the trajectory of how they think about connecting and leading and investing in communities for years to come. It's really amazing. All right, Cassie, I got one more question for you, which is to talk specifically about the volleyball season that just happened this past year in March. And again, when I first learned about it, I was so impressed with the holistic way that you thought about, as a leadership team, making choices to not just allow your team to play and play safely, but to lift up the community that you were really serving at that time. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about this past second season for you.
Yeah, so we played our first season in Dallas in 2021, and we were preparing to return for our second season when the Texas state legislature passed a whole slate of controversial laws, banning certain topics from being taught in school, some things around voter suppression, abortion access. And so we had a moment, I chair the player executive committee, and we had a moment where we had to discuss, do we want to return? Or do we want to boycott? What's going to be the most effective thing for us? What's going to be safe for our athletes? We're a women's sports league. Like, we need to make sure that our athletes have access to medical care if necessary. There were laws around allowing access to guns without a permit. We had to know if we could ban guns from our venue. And so we talked about it, and obviously there were people with really strong feelings. And one of the things that was important to us was, I had read Stacey Abrams' op-ed in after the Major League Baseball left Georgia for the All-Star game. They decided to boycott Georgia, I think also around voter suppression issues, unfortunately. And, in her op-ed, she essentially had said, boycotts can be great. They can also hurt the very people that you're trying to help. All of the small businesses that are making money off of, the game being there, et cetera. And so it was really important to us to get some input from the people who were actually on the ground, actually doing the work in Dallas, in Texas. So we connected with some of the groups down there and ended up deciding that we could actually do more by staying than leaving. And so in our case, boycotting was not going to be as effective. So we ended up going there, and we formed kind of a whole working group with athletes from all of our sports and our staff around, what are we going to do when we show up? How do we use our voices in that space in a way that's effective? And I think what was cool about what we ended up with was, rather than come in protest and kind of anger around these laws, and there was plenty of anger to go around, we decided to come in celebration of our values. And so we created kind of space in our arena for the things that mattered to us and things that we cared about. And so we had a bookstore with books that had been chosen from our athletes that were all by, authors with marginalized voices. And we had a wall dedicated to women from history who had inspired our athletes, and a voter registration booth at all of our matches. And so that arena became not only, a space that we played in, but the celebration of everything that we cared about. And some of which was in opposition, to those laws that have been passed, but kind of really in a positive way. And so to see that kind of come into fruition, and to be sitting there signing autographs and then watching little girls walk up to a wall and read about Ida B. Wells or Juanita Craft or all of these women who had fought segregation and had created Title IX and all of that. I think for me, to do that in the middle of Texas in that moment and to bring these women there, that was super impactful.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible story. I mean, just that whole reframe. We actually teach that in our class. You just gave everyone a little cliff note. And one of the things we do in Inventing the Future is we challenge assumptions. How do we turn a constraint into an opportunity? What if, right? So the obvious, or maybe the one what was right in front of you was to boycott, but instead you were inspired to say, you know what, how do we turn this into an opportunity? And I just wanted to pull up again this fabulous partnership that you brokered with vote.org. And I know you're doing an event coming up in a couple of weeks that's continuing to go to say, look, Texas just passed voter restriction laws. What can we do with our power and our platform and what we do have control over to actually support more people registering? And this idea of, again, in a state that is passing book banning laws, how do we have control over our merchandise shop to make sure we are selling the books about the stories we care about? So Cassie, I just want to say thank you so much. I hope everybody reads your story. We're going to be sending it out as some of the resources that we're going to give folks after this. I want to say I'm the proud owner of some of your merch, Power of My Voice. I love that the arrow is to the my, and I really hope that teams really look at what you're doing as inspiration. How can we use what's available to us to further the values that we care about? And so Cassie, keep doing what you're doing. I know you've got a TED Talk coming up about this. We're all going to be excited to read that and so excited to see what happens next for your season and with Athletes Unlimited. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you. This has been an awesome event. I'm super excited about it. And I hope all the athletes listening are getting little pieces they can take back and then implement in their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. What can we do, right? So much surface area. So thank you so much.